So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining the October Forum from Wellbeing Economy Cymru. We're delighted to be hosting a discussion this evening about activism and what it means to be an activist, what drives us, what keeps us motivated, and how can we motivate more people to step up and make a difference? So the Wellbeing Economy Alliance is a movement that is really gaining a lot of traction here in Wales. The wellbeing economy is happening across Wales, and as part of a global network of national hubs, we're really proud in Wales to be able to demonstrate such a vibrant wellbeing economy movement of organisations and change makers at every level of society and government, really making change happen towards an economy that serves the well-being of people and local places and the environment, and an economy that moves away from kind of free market economics and an obsession with metrics like GDP and productivity towards a more holistic view of what our economy is for and how we value what's important. And one of the reasons that we have such a strong emerging wellbeing economy movement here in Wales is thanks to the hard work and dedication of a really mixed and diverse collective of activists and change makers across the country on a wide range of different issues that matter to each of us individually and collectively. So as I say, what we're hoping to discuss today is what motivates people to step up and try and make a difference, and particularly in the sort of context that we're operating in. I think it's fair to say that we live in incredibly discouraging times, and sometimes the global context, the national context, the political and the climate context just seems overwhelmingly difficult to even contemplate, let alone to try and think what we can solve and make a difference. And so how do we keep ourselves motivated and keep ourselves moving forward in such difficult times? And I've been really looking forward to this evening's conversation because I've had a really tough couple of weeks, and I think I'm really suffering with that sort of burnout and overwhelm and sense of overall hopelessness that I'm sure many of us encounter, especially as we're trying to make a difference in very difficult circumstances. So I'm hoping this evening will be a session of really reconnection and comradeship across movements, where we can be inspired by each other and hopefully leave more energized and motivated and feeling like actually together, when we work together, we can make change. And really, we just have to look around us in Wales. You know, there is such a lot that we can be proud of, real great movements and campaigns that have made a huge difference to the way Wales is governed and the values that guide our governments and our organisations. Perhaps we can all take strength from that and think of the changes we've made and feel positive about the changes that we can make if we continue on this journey. But how can we motivate more people to think that they can make change happen and to step up and be activists in whatever way that means to them? And part of that is about perhaps broadening our understanding or definition of what we mean by an activist. And we'll be hearing from a sort of diverse range of change makers today who are activists in different ways, in different contexts. So I hope that will be really fascinating. This forum is different from some of our normal forums in that we are co-hosting the session this evening with the Youth Climate Ambassadors for Wales, that's YCA Wales, and my colleague Ellie is here to represent YCA. So over to you, Ellie. Would you like to say hello?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Dawn. Like Dawn said, I'm here tonight representing both Wellbeing Economy Cymru, We Cymru, and the Youth Climate Ambassadors for Wales, YCA Wales, which is of course an honour. But to give a really brief introduction to YCA Wales, we're an apolitical group of 14 young people from across Wales campaigning for climate justice and aiming to amplify young voices both here in Wales and around the world. But I won't give any more away because we do have a panelist from YCA Wales here to speak later on. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you very much. So we'll get straight on with introducing the first of our speakers. and that is our good friend Hayley Richards. And so, as I said, we're broadening the definition of what it means to be an activist, and Hayley is a community-based activist in Pontypridd. And Hayley, we would love to hear your take on tonight's conversation. What motivates you? What keeps you going? And how do you think we can encourage more people to think that they can make a difference in their own way? Over to you, Hayley.
Thanks, Dawn, and thanks very much to Ellie for the invitation to join the conversation. I must admit, when I had the email from Ellie, I thought, you know, why am I being invited to speak at this event? Because I hadn't really considered myself as an activist. Or necessarily a change maker, but maybe change maker is more suitable than activist, I don't know. I just kind of feel that I'm a person that's concerned about things happening in the world, and I've got like a deep desire to make myself useful in the community that I live. So yeah, you know, maybe that's activism, I don't know, but perhaps we can have a conversation about that moving forward. And then kind of moving on from that, I was kind of thinking, you know, what motivated me, or what kind of led to that concern initially in my life. And I can take it back to when I was 13, I think I was, or around about 13, and the images of the Ethiopian famine were on our screens. Michael Burke was the news reporter, and the horrific images of children starving in Ethiopia. And I just couldn't believe it. I don't come from a, you know, a financially rich family. We were quite poor when I was growing up. I lived in a valleys community. My father was self-employed. He was a labourer. So we were, you know, we didn't come from a financially secure family, but, you know, we had everything we needed. We never went without anything. And to see those images on the screen, I just couldn't believe that some people in the world, you know, didn't have enough to eat, didn't have water, and like how horrific that was, that some people have so much and some people have so little. So and then, you know, obviously out of that there was a groundswell of people doing things to try and support, and, you know, there was Live Aid and lots of other kind of spin-offs like Live Aid to raise funds for that, for the people of Ethiopia, and I joined kind of those activities. I you know, raised funds myself and did sponsored things and that kind of thing. And so I think that's where my kind of deep concern comes from, was the recognition at that age that the world is not equal, and there are those that have, you know, too much, and there are those that have too little. And then kind of where I am now, I'm by trade, I guess, I'm a policy officer. And why I'm interested in kind of wellbeing economics is because for anyone who's kind of involved in policy work, when you've been doing it for kind of 10, 20 years, it's the same problems that you see cropping up, you know, over and over and over again. And it's like being on a hamster wheel. And, you know, all we're doing really with that kind of policy work is chipping away at the edges of the problems, and not really getting anywhere. You know, every decade we're asking Welsh Government for another child poverty strategy with targets and indicators, similarly with, you know, trying to move forward on climate change. So, you know, it really chipping away at the edges is not enough, and all the problems that we face come because the system is broken. So that was where kind of my interest in the wellbeing economy came in, because the economy, the broken economy, is at the heart of all of our problems, and if we could fix that, then you know, then a lot of the other problems would be fixed too. And I live in like a small market town in Pontypridd, and I've lived here for probably 17 years now. So like when you move to a new place, you need to kind of bed in a little bit first. You need to find your tribe in that place and get kind of feel like you belong a bit more. So it took me a while to do that in Pontypridd, and then kind of once I felt like I was bedded in, I guess, a couple of things happened. I had a family, so that took up a lot of time. But then a couple of things happened where I kind of decided that it wasn't good enough to kind of go to work and do good things. I was lucky enough to have a job where I could make positive change in my work through the policy work that I was doing. But you could also bring the skills that you use in your work or the gifts that you have as an individual into your community. And the few things that kind of triggered that is, three things really. The first was I went on a really great course on gender and power, which helped me understand that I'm a very kind of behind the scenes kind of person. This is not my kind of safe space where we are today. I like to be behind the scenes and chipping away maybe behind the scenes. I don't like to be front and center, but the gender power course kind of taught me that you can lead from many different places. You don't have to be the person that's up front. You can share your skills and from many different places. And so I decided to do more things in my community. At the same time, Brexit happened, and then closely followed by Trump becoming president of the United States. And you just kind of think that we have to step up, because by being apathetic and pretending that like nothing's happening and just sitting at home watching telly in your own bubble is not going to kind of get us anywhere really. So that's where I kind of started to do things in my community. And obviously I'd already kind of found my tribe in Pontypridd, people, like-minded people that I could gather with, I guess. So I did, I've done a few things in my local area. I'm currently the reluctant volunteer coordinator of Friends of the Earth Pontypridd, only because nobody else wants to do it really. And together we do various things under that kind of banner. I've helped kind of set up a repair cafe in Pontypridd, and during COVID I set up a project called Grow Pontypridd, which tried to provide kind of surplus plants and seeds to people who are accessing the food bank, so that people could have a try at growing for the first time. And then kind of in terms of I guess trying to motivate others to step up, then I think a lot of it, I'm very privileged. I've got some time that I can devote to things that I feel are important, but not everyone has that privilege. Some people are working 2 jobs just to try and put food on the table. Some people, have to access food banks. More recently, I've struggled with time myself, because I've got, not just child caring responsibilities, but partner and parents as well. So that, restricts my time, and that's the same for lots of people. So, and also there's difficulty in finding the headspace, I guess, you can get overwhelmed with the level of action that's needed. So I think there's to try and kind of diversify the activism base. Then I feel like we do need everybody to kind of step up, but not everyone has that privilege. So we need to kind of remove barriers. And that's making sure people have their basic needs met, making sure people have enough money to live, and that kind of and also people kind of have opportunities. So, and that kind of frees up more time that people can learn about different things and think about different things and act on different things. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably enough for now, but I'm sure, like, if anyone's got any questions, then happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Hayley. Yeah, it resonates a lot really with a lot of the things you've said there, but that recognition of firstly inequality around you, and then as you say, the world just seemed to get darker, didn't it? With the rise of Trump and the sort of division that created, and I can see how that kind of compelled many of us to feel like we couldn't just sit by and do nothing. But in your case, you looked really locally and thought, well, what can you do on your own doorstep? And do you think that was, is that in some way a response to how enormous the problems are out there? And so a sense of like, find where your power is in a hyper local way? Is it about trying to start something small in the hope that will grow, or the hope that others around the world are also trying to do the same, starting local? You know, where's the logic for you in the sort of local action?
Yeah, I think like primarily it was because in my day job I was working at like a more national level, and I wanted to be able to share things that I'd learned through my day job with to try and make things better in my own community. I mean, the other thing more recently was obviously in 20 like either 2019 or 2020 we had the terrible flooding in Pontypridd, so to kind of see in the raw climate change in your own town and the families and businesses that were affected by that you know a lot of people and in Pontypridd, you know, really got a bit more switched on then that this is a real thing and we need to do more things locally. So and I mean, not wanting to kind of bring the conversation down, but also you know, nobody's going to do this for us. I don't have a huge amount of confidence in the political system or the fact that government is going to sort out our problems. So in some ways, it was resigning myself to the fact that we need to build resilience in local communities and get ready for whatever the future might hold.
Yeah, I really feel deeply everything you've said there, and that thing about building our resilience for the future really strikes a chord with me. Nigel, you've got a question. Please come in.
Hey Hayley, I really struggle quite often when I talk about these things because of the emotional side of it and my emotional attachment to why I campaign or to why I act as an activist or I support activism as such. It's really hard, isn't it? I mean, the emotion in it that you can express is almost the authentic voice. And I really think that I shouldn't be scared of that emotion that sits really close to my throat whenever I speak about these things. Yeah, all you can do is breathe, take a breath, I suppose, and just kind of let it go. And don't be scared of that emotion that might come over, because really it's probably the most potent thing in your voice or whenever you do speak to people, if you truly mean what you're saying and that's coming over. And I think, do you battle with that at all, Hayley, and the emotion that's attached to your activism or your change making, or however you wish to define it?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think like spaces like this are good, aren't they? Because like, I mean, I've grown up, you know, in a time where you kind of hide your emotions more. But I mean, what's good kind of about nowadays is that people are much more open. People are happy to talk about, you know, mental health issues. But I think like for kind of activists, then we really need to be creating lots more, especially kind of physical, psychologically safe spaces where people can talk openly about the grief that they feel for what's happening all around us. And somehow, you know, by sharing that grief, then we we connect together more strongly, and it gives us the energy and the hope to drive forward, doesn't it? So but we need lots more spaces and need to be more open with each other to, because it is healthy to get that emotion out, isn't it? And to feel that you're among comrades that that share the grief that you feel, and so you can support each other and go back out into the world with renewed energy almost.
Yeah, such an important message there, and thank you, Nigel, for surfacing that. And as Hayley was speaking there about the grief that we feel for the world, that makes me emotional, and it is that means we have to step up and do something in a way, isn't it? But also the sort of bottling up of emotion. When you look at so many people across society, it strikes me that the kind of pretending everything is still okay is like this collective delusion that everything is still fine and we can just carry on with our normal lives as if everything's going to be fine. That must be very difficult for a lot of people to be kind of suppressing that awareness and not finding those safe spaces to be able to express that grief. And I've definitely felt it myself, that when I can let the emotion out, I feel better afterwards. You always feel better after a big cry, don't you? And you need spaces where you can do that, and that sense that you're not a crazy lady on your own, that other people do see the same reality that you see. So yeah, that's a real strong message. Thank you so much, both. We'll have more time to talk to Hayley and to everybody as the evening goes on, but I'd like to move on now to introduce our second panelist. Thank you so much, Hayley. That was a fantastic start to this evening, and I'm sure we're all really feeling connected to everything you've shared. But our second speaker is coming at this from another angle. Carol Shepherd is joining us from a fantastic campaign group called Swansea Takes On Period Poverty, STOP. And Hayley, you talked about women and power, and so it will be great to hear from Carol. What motivates you? What keeps you going? How do you think we can grow the capacity for activism across our communities? But yeah, please do share your perspective and your story. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. So hello there. Yes, I'm Carol, and Carol Shepherd, and tonight I am representing STOP. I was sitting here thinking about the wellbeing economy, because STOP is something that I do in a voluntary capacity, and in my life I do a lot of things around wellbeing. So I'm a yoga teacher, I run a choir, community choir. I work for another small charity that works with women and girls. We have a food growing project. We do events that are about getting women together and sharing ideas, sharing skills. So there's lots of overlap. There's also a lot of overlap with Hayley, and her opening kind of sentence was exactly what I was thinking. So when I was asked to do this, I was like, oh, am I an activist? I don't know, maybe I am. And so I was chatting with my partner about this, and he was like, of course you are. And so it made me think, well, what is activism? And I thought, well, I suppose it's about that will for change, that wanting things to be different, like seeing something that you think is unjust and unfair, and then wondering, well, can I do anything that would change that? And then finding ways to get involved. And for me as well, I think remembering that small actions make a difference, and even if it feels like a small thing, that might have an influence on somebody that makes them do things differently. And that's a big part, I think, of what STOP has to offer. So I was going to tell you quickly a little bit about STOP. So as Dawn said, it stands for Swansea Takes On Period Poverty. And in STOP, we've got kind of three things that we think we do. So it's about raising awareness. It's around distributing products and challenging stigma. And if we talk about this idea of period poverty, the first thing is people not being able to afford period products. And so Stop's first aim is to provide products. We have a no questions asked policy. Anyone can get in touch with us, say what they need, and if we can, we will deliver that to them. So we have a group of volunteers who will come and pick up products and drop them off to women, or to people, I should say, because that's one of our other things, is that maybe women, girls, and maybe people who don't identify as women may still have periods. People who do identify as women might not have periods. So that's part of that kind of the stigma, kind of challenging the stigma and raising awareness, really. But back with the products. One of the things that we've been really committed to is getting reusable products out there and being used. So when we get funding, we buy lots of reusable products, but we also buy more environmentally friendly products. So plastic-free pads, plastic-free tampons as well. And I was reflecting on the power of that simple choice there. That often things might be more expensive, or there might be an initial outlay. If you want to change the way you do things, it can be difficult to make that choice. Whereas if somebody wants to try using period products that are a bit different, then they might like to try something. There's something that's called a menstrual cup. They cost about £30. That's quite a big outlay. But if you want to use one and start to use one, then you don't need another one for years. And you're not using plastic. You're not using different products every month. Another big change we've seen, even in the time that we've been going, which is since 2019, is products such as period pants. And I want to mention those because we didn't really even have any of those in stock to start with. They weren't really a thing. And then suddenly we found out about them, and they were quite expensive, but we thought, it's okay, we've got money, let's get some. And then if people start using them, maybe they will decide to invest in more. And now that you can get them in Marks and Spencers, so and Primark, they're out there, and I think that's an inspiring change for me that makes me realise that our kind of quite small scale activism of just going, we're not going to buy plastic products and we're going to make some other things available, has allowed other people to then maybe make different choices that in the long term will have an impact. I'm looking at my little list of notes, and I thought about my activism. I'm just going to come back to my little list, because my first thing was, I thought, for me, it's about talking about it. And so one of the things that we've talked about a lot in Stop is around this idea of stigma and periods, and the use of language like feminine hygiene and sanitary products, and going, well, it makes it sound like periods are something that's kind of dirty and not really hygienic, and of course that's complete nonsense. So we're very much of a position of going, let's say it as it is. If it's a period, it's a period, and you're going to need a products to help you during the time that you are menstruating. Let's as I was preparing, I thought, yes, we say period products, we don't go sanitary towels. And I can see there are people of my age who or maybe similar, who if you found that you needed something, you'd be like, sanitary towels, it'd be a whispered thing. My husband talks about knowing that there was a cupboard in his home when he was growing up where his mum and his sister kept STs, and they wouldn't even talk about it. It was just ST, that was all they would say. So we can make a difference by talking about things. We can change the way people think. We can change the way that we respond and react to each other. I thought my second thing was doing something practical. So in Stop, what we do, we get funding. Most of the funding that we've got has come from the Swansea Council grant, what's it called? The Period Dignities in Communities grant. And so then we use that to buy products, and then we get those out there into communities. So it's that practical thing. Let's buy some stuff and deliver it. And then the third one is what I've kind of talked about a lot already, and I was going to give you a really concrete example from my own life. And so that's the idea of creating opportunities for individuals to make different choices. And I've got 2 grown-up children. They're 24 and 26. And a few years ago for Christmas, I wrapped up some washable period pads. I thought, I don't even know what my girls use, but let's buy them some and they can give them a try. The eldest one, who doesn't live at home anymore, I found out months later that as soon as she'd started using them, she'd got online and bought a load more. She was like, they're brilliant. And the other one, we joked about it because last Christmas she said, I love those pads you got me, Mum, but can I have some period pants for Christmas this year? So, and then of course they tell their friends, and so the word spreads. So there we are, talking about it, doing something practical and creating opportunities for other people to make different choices. I think that's where I'm at. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Carol, for that. Really fantastic, and a real demonstration of activism in just talking about things and challenging us all with any sense of discomfort in the first half of your presentation, and that in itself is activism, and really great to hear. I was also thinking, yeah, activism in what you give someone for Christmas. You know, activism can just take all these forms, can't it? And yeah, normalizing those different choices, like you were explaining there with the move to kind of plastic-free products, yeah, demonstrates all the ways in which we can make change without necessarily seeing ourselves as activists. And you used the word volunteers. You said, oh, we buy all these products and then volunteers deliver them to people. And I thought, well, you're using the word volunteer, and in a way a volunteer is also an activist, isn't it? Because they're standing up for something, they're taking a position on something and doing something about it. So I think there were some really inspiring examples in what you said there, and a different take on what it means to be an activist. And yeah, people like you normalizing those things, confronting stigmas and knocking them down and creating new possibilities for people. That is really powerful. I wonder whether you feel like you have met other women who have felt empowered through their contact with STOP, and whether it's created a community of an empowering community for women, whether you've seen the kind of ripple effects of your own activism in the kind of networks that you've developed through the project.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that comes into my mind for that question is I know that there are people who volunteer for us who've been helped by us, you know, so who may have contacted us in a time of crisis and then want to be able to kind of give back and not financially, but they realize they can do that with their time. And I guess I can't say it for sure, but I know that by so things like people, what often happens is we get into a habit, don't we? And there might be a particular product that you know, every month you just buy that because that's what you've always used and that's what you always do. And so if suddenly you're confronted with something different that's a plastic-free product, and then you might go, oh, I didn't even know that you could get plastic-free pads. And then that might make you then choose to ask for that in future. And so I guess I can't guarantee that's happened, but I'll be very, very surprised if that hasn't happened in a lot of cases. And I also know I've had conversations when we've kind of had, you know, stands at different events, and people have said, oh, I've always wondered, you know, I've wondered what a menstrual cup was. Can I have a look? You know, and we've got one that people can have. Or, oh, is that what period pants look like? Oh, okay. So I think again, the conversations just create opportunities, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Carol, for sharing with us your wonderful work in Swansea. And I really like how you've got the same principle as Hayley, but you are acting on it in a completely different way. You're both still making huge differences in your communities, but you're doing it about different things and in different ways. And I think that's really inspiring. But on to our next panelist. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Momina Ali, who is the founder of Ethnic Minorities and Youth Support Team in Wales. Then that's East Wales. Momina, are you ready? Are you here?
I do have a
Perfect.
presentation to share. Is it possible?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
There we go. You should be able to share now.
Has it gone through?
Yep, you should be able to share new. We can't see it yet.
Okay. Loading. So sorry, I'm seeming to have a problem.
No problem.
Could I just if I copy the link, could I send it on the?
Yep. You can send it in the on an email or in the chat, and I'm happy to share that for you. It's just okay. Yes, please do start. We'd love to.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mumina Ali. I'm from a charity called East Wales, which stands for Ethnic Minorities and Youth Support Team. I was actually laughing when now Carol was talking about her conversation with her husband. That's the exact conversation I had, because I didn't get the pack till I think around about 4:30 when I opened the pack, because my colleague Hilal, who made the connections, I think Wednesday, he said to me, "Are you available Thursday evening?" I actually had something this evening at 7:30. So I thought it was at 7 o'clock and I would just do 10 minutes and I'd be off. And then it turned out no. So anyway, I managed to rearrange everything. So, but when I read the pack straight away, I said to my husband, "I don't think I'm an activist, am I?" And then he said, "Well, you are. East is because of your activism, what you aspired and what you did." So it really made me think and reflect on my own sort of journey and my life. So sometimes we get so busy in the work that we actually don't have time to reflect and think about things. So yeah, so this is, I don't know if anyone's seen the logo. So this is East. We initially had the logo of the green, the blue and the yellow and the red, which actually, if you turn it around, it symbolizes a running person, young person running, you know, in terms of, you know, focusing and running in their life. And it was actually designed by one of our young people 20 years ago when we started the work. So we wanted to not lose that original sort of logo. So we then expanded to East Wales. So we kept the two logos together. So just a bit of background on that. So the next slide. Yeah, so East is an award-winning charity. We started, so before I go into the actual journey of East, just a bit about the organization. It started as a male-only youth organization in 2001, which was a pilot phase of the organization. And at the time, there was only funding available to work with ethnic minority young boys because that group was seen as the most vulnerable. So initially, the constitution was just to work with young males, 11 to 25. But as we worked in the community, we recognized that the need for the female support was also required. And then we realized that we needed to support the family. So East grew organically as an organization, but the focus was always young people. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is a sort of an overview what East is about. So our mission is really to have a Wales in which ethnic minority people can contribute, participate, and feel they are valued members of society. So the word value is really important because this is exactly what kind of ignited that desire in me to set up something like East, because I didn't feel valued as an ethnic minority member of my community growing up. And I felt that was important, that every human being should feel valued and feel part of their community and their society. So this is kind of the mission we have, and the vision we have. And the mission is to provide quality service, which empowers ethnic minority young people, their families and individuals, to work effectively with mainstream partners and influence policies and practices that are actually discriminating against minority communities. And then also to positively promote diversity and improve public attitude towards ethnic minorities in Wales. So overall, this is, like I mentioned, if you look at point one, we started with ethnic minority young people, then we expanded it to families. We recognize that working with ethnic minority young people, often we needed to support their families with a lot of number of issues, where there was issues in housing, issues with parenting, cultural differences, cultural understanding, intergenerational issues. So a lot of the time we were spending a lot of time working with the families, so we expanded our remit. And then a lot of the families we were supporting were from asylum and refugee background. So again, we expanded our work to work with asylum and refugee. We have a refugee and asylum hub, sanctuary hub in Swansea, St Helens Road. Then we also wanted to empower community groups within our community, small groups. So we supported a lot of community groups, volunteers. We have a whole volunteer coordinator work going on. And to be honest, without our volunteers, we wouldn't have grown as we have as an organization. So we really, really value our volunteers. And overall, we want to also not just work on the grassroots level, but also challenge racism and be part of this anti-racism action plan that East actually was instrumental in setting this up and starting this movement. We also provide training. So this is how East has grown organically. So where did it all start? If you go to the next slide, please. Oh, so sorry, before I go to that bit. So we've been very fortunate. We've had lots of awards and achievements throughout the years. And these things, to be honest, are not important for us, as an organization, but we do recognize that sometimes you need these current titles and positions just to get yourself that recognition in order to secure funding. Funding is our biggest challenge, I would say, in doing this work. We are constantly, striving to secure funding to continue our work, and titles like this give us that opportunity. So these are some of the awards and achievements. If we can go next, please. Yeah, so it all started at the age of 16. Why this age? I was growing up in Swansea in a community was predominantly white. I went to a mainly working class school, and I faced a lot of challenges growing up, a lot of racism, institutional racism as well from within the educational institute. And I was really, really disheartened and frustrated because of the treatment I received and a few other members of the ethnic minority pupils that were in the school received. And I always felt this was wrong. The people shouldn't be treated this way because of the color of the skin. Things shouldn't be this way. Teachers should, treat all of us equally. We should all be valued. These are things that always kept coming to my mind. And I just felt, I felt like I didn't belong when this was home for me. Swansea was home, but I was constantly being told to go back, and I didn't know what that meant. So all of these things kind of kept challenging me. And at the age, one of my biggest sort of support was my father, who was very passionate about social justice. And he suddenly passed away when I was 15. And that kind of shattered my world. And I suddenly felt like there's no point in fighting anymore because I just don't have that strength. And my dad kind of was my biggest motivator and strength. And I just felt that, it doesn't really matter because now that my dad is not here, it doesn't really matter how I get treated or what happens in the world. So I decided actually I would drop out of education because I felt like I didn't have the energy to fight, although I knew my father wanted me to go into further education. He wanted me to graduate and do something for my community, but I just didn't have the energy. And I was very, very fortunate at that time in my life that my form tutor, who was actually a Christian preacher, he was my RE teacher, he took me under his wing, and he basically became my father figure, and he motivated me. And I talked about all my passions and my dreams. And then, it was that moment when we sat, I still remember the conversation. We were sitting there and I was talking to him about all my experiences, the negative, the positives, everything, and the desire that I want to change things for young people. I don't want other young people to go through what I've gone through. I became a young carer because my mom fell very ill after my father passed away. So she was in and out of hospital, and I had the responsibility, I'm one of 8. So I had the responsibility of 6 siblings after me. So all of this on my shoulder, I felt like, I needed to do something, to make that difference. And we had a long conversation that day, and I said to him, I want to do something to make this change. And he said to me, you can and you will. But first of all, you need to, get back on track with your education, because your knowledge will empower you and it will give you that tool to be able to do what you want to do. So from that moment, I studied social science. I did it at A-level. Then I went to do a degree in sociology and anthropology, all with a vision of one day setting up something for young people, a place where they can be. And it was modeled around my relationship with my teacher, who, looking back, was actually a mentor. and I realized the power of this mentor relationship, just to have somebody that believes in you and how you can change anything around you. Just, you have to have that self-belief, and also somebody to reinforce that self-belief. And that was really powerful. So I kind of modeled East around that. And so when I graduated, an opportunity came to do some research within Swansea Local Authority Education Department, looking at disengagement amongst ethnic minority young people, in particular young boys. And that's where the pilot of East started. And although the research project was for 2 years, because this was my lived experience, I've been waiting for this opportunity, basically. So within 9 months, I finished the research, and then I asked if I could pilot this mentoring program. And I said that it was based on my relationship with my teacher and how the mentoring impacted me to change the situation for myself. And I believe if this is provided for ethnic minority young people who are vulnerable of dropping out of education, then that would also give them that opportunity to reach their full potential and break down some of these barriers. So I was very fortunate that my managers at the time, under the Director of Education, were very keen to support this pilot, but they did make it very clear that there wouldn't be any funding post the research ending, that I wouldn't be able to set this pilot up as a support system after this. So I was conscious of that. So from that moment on, although the pilot was happening at the same time, I was looking at the third sector and setting East up as a third sector organization. So the work was happening parallel. It meant working the day job and the evening to set it all up. So yeah, so that's kind of how it all started. And it was this drive to make that change, to be able to make that difference. And if we go into the next slide. So yeah, I just wanted to share this. This was last year in World Teachers' Day. So this is my teacher. So this was me initially when I was doing A-levels with my teacher. I studied ARI, and this is last year on World Teacher Day. I invited him to East offices just to kind of, say thank you to him yet again for all the support he's given me. And it's really important to have somebody to believe in you and to be able to support you. And sometimes we might think it has to be people who you can relate to in terms of color or language. Not necessarily. It just means another human believing in another human. That's all it takes. So, despite, and to be honest, even my inspiration in my faith, I wasn't in connection with my own faith when I was 16. I mean, I was a young person, and very few young people connect that deeply, but it was him who encouraged me to look into my own faith, to find my sort of pathway to deal with the grief that I was going through and everything else. So he not only helped me, in terms of finding a focus in terms of education and then furthering my career, he also helped me spiritually to get connected to my own faith, despite being from, a completely different faith to me. So again, it kind of shows we can overcome all of these things that sometimes people use to keep us apart. We can connect at all levels. So this is just, I wanted to share this with you all. And in the next slide, what kind of I just want to go through what a story that what he shared with me when I was going through a difficult time with East, in terms of funding and setting it up, because it was obviously very challenging to set up BME organization in a time where we didn't have many examples, and it was a very challenging time. And I remember sharing the difficulties, and this story was told to me, and I think it's really really powerful, and you can get this on the internet anyway. It's a story called the Starfish Story, where a man is walking along the beach, and he sees this young boy picking up starfishes and throwing them back into the ocean. And he approaches the young boy and he says, what are you doing? And he says, oh, I'm throwing these starfish back into the ocean, and the surf is up, and if I don't, the tide is going down, if I don't do it, they will die. So the man said to him, do you realize that there's miles and miles of beach and hundreds of starfish? What difference can you make? And out of risk, he didn't say anything. Quietly he picked up another starfish and he threw it back into the water, and he said, I made a difference to that one. So this really motivates me. This is my sort of motivation in carrying on. Although 20 years later, I'm still banging on the same doors about issues, the same racism is happening in school, the same discrimination is happening, the same lived experience as I lived is happening to young people to this day. We have a project called Right to Education, where ethnic minority young people are more likely to be excluded from education for things that you wouldn't even think it would be an exclusion, but this is what's happening. And this used to happen 20 years ago. So when I get questioned, like, you've been doing this for 20 years and systematically not much has changed really. But I know for myself, in this 20 years, there's a lot of starfishes that have gone back into the ocean and are surviving and doing amazing things. You know, we have so many success stories of young people, you know, that even for myself, some of the young boys that I mentored who were heavily involved in drugs, alcohol, gambling, lots of other issues, you know, completely disengaged from the community, from their family. They got back into track through the mentoring. Some of them are solicitors, some of them are very successful business owners in Swansea, you know, and opened their own businesses. Some of them have gone abroad, some of them have gone in different parts of the UK, doing amazing things in their chosen career paths. And this is the support because they had somebody that believed in them, just the way my teacher believed in me. So this is a really important thing that I feel motivates me, that every single individual young person or individual human being is important. And if we can make a difference in one person's life, again, from my faith perspective, if you can help one person, you can save one person, is as if you save the whole of humanity. So this is really important. So for me, in terms of activism and what does it mean to me, it means the ability to harness energy and enthusiasm and drive to do good, whatever field it is that a person may choose to do good in. So it's about empowering, and in my line of work is about empowering ethnic minority young people to achieve their full potential, to become active members of their community and to give back to their community and to be a positive impact in their community across Wales, you know, and this is the kind of way I look at activism. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel so privileged this evening to hear the origin story of East and to hear your personal inspiring story there. And I suppose so much that I would love to reflect on. And I love the starfish story. I think that's a really powerful way of keeping ourselves motivated. And thank you for sharing that. And I think you're coming at your activism from this kind of lived experience of racism and injustice in your own life that has motivated you to try and make things different. You said, I just don't want others to go through what I went through. And I think that is such a powerful motivator, and that decision you made to sort of stand up and be strong. And yeah, the importance of those people in our lives, they may not realize it at the time, the difference they make, but you were that one starfish, weren't you, for that teacher? You know, he threw you back into the ocean and enabled you to thrive, and you can just see how the cycles repeat. So it's such a beautiful story. Thank you so much, Mamina. Stephen, would you like to come in? Oh, I can't hear you. You lowered your hand, but you didn't unmute yourself.
I have done now.
Great.
What an amazing session. So thank you, Dawn, for inviting me to contribute. What do I say first? I've got 3 thoughts in my head off the back of this session so far. So I'm Stephen. For those of you who don't know me, that I'm part of the core group and Wellbeing Economy Wales, and we've been working on a whole set of sessions on these forums, for those of you who haven't been on all of them, that look at parts of Wales that could be impacted by the introduction of a wellbeing economy: physical health, mental health, business, food, housing, climate, education, that we're coming on to soon. And when we talked about having activism on, I wasn't quite sure how this would work because it doesn't kind of sit with the rest of them. But I've said in the back channel to my colleagues that this is probably the most impactful session that I've been involved in. I think the emotion that's in this session, the power of people's impact on lives around them is probably stronger in this session than in the other. So that's one point for me to make. I think and I'm going to reflect on that myself. So I think that's things for me to ponder on. But also, Mamina, your talk just now, and I think it's really important. There's a bit of a theme of saying activism is about lots of different things, and some of it is about just communicating, and some of it is about volunteering, and it's not necessarily, gluing yourself to some railings. And your activism, Amina, I think is really, really, really empowering, because it's the one that says, well, these things have happened to me and I didn't respond as a deep sigh. You responded as in with some help, like your teacher that you described. So you needed a catalyst, or not, you maybe didn't need that. I suspect you would have found a different catalyst somewhere else, but that catalyst worked for you, and that gave you the voice to then move into a different place. And just to be clear, Mamina, very few people would have responded as you have to the challenges you've had in your life. So that element of your activism, I think, is says a lot about you as an individual. And for the rest of us, we reflect on how would we behave and what does activism mean for us. It doesn't mean we have to be at that level, but there are levels, and that's a very inspirational description of your world. And my final reflection, I'm going to make this really short and then just leave it in the crowd, is that the gender orientation on this call is quite significant. And I don't know whether that reflects on activism per se, or whether it reflects on how the group has been pulled together. But it's something that I'm going to reflect on as well. So there you go, Dawn. I'm just going to leave that one hanging, Dawn.
Yeah, well, I think we are among a wonderful team of inspiring women on the call for sure, but we've also got Marcus with us, who is equally inspiring, so no spoilers. But yes, I think that response, choosing an empowering response to difficult situations in our lives or in the world, that is activism, isn't it? Choosing not to lie down and just give up, but choosing an empowered response to say, actually, I can do something about this. That is activism. And I wonder, Momina, whether a sort of similar question to what I asked Carol is, where you've seen the ripple effect of your activism, can you recognize amongst ethnic minority communities and amongst young people that they are more empowered to stand up on issues that matter to them? And have you seen your own role in being a catalyst for activism in others?
Yes, like Hayley mentioned when she was speaking about being in the background. For many years, I stayed in the background with East because that's where I'm most comfortable. And but I recognized after a while, when firstly I got nominated for a few awards, and I was really uncomfortable. And I said to my team then, you should have told me before nominating me. I'm not comfortable in these open space. I remember one of them said to me, you don't realize how empowering just you being in the front line is for many young people, especially young females, in particular coming from the Bangladeshi community, which is where I'm from. So this in itself is very empowering, and I get amazed just how empowering it is. Just the other day, I was at a funeral in Swansea. From one of the community members passed away, and I was at this funeral, and a young girl came up to me and she gave me a hug and she said, "Oh, you don't recognize me, do you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. No, I actually live in Cardiff now, but even though I'm still very much in the Swansea community because my family is there, so I didn't recognize." And she said, "Oh, you used to come to our school and used to talk about this and used to talk about this. I used to do drop-ins initially when I started my work, the mentoring." And she said, "You really inspired me to go on to university." And this young person, I didn't even mentor. I didn't even have. She said, "I never used to speak. I used to come quietly and just listen to you." So I was just completely blown away that I used to think it's only those who are mentored that had that impact. I didn't realize just physically being in front of young girls, empowering them by being in my hijab, my identity, and being strong in my authentic self was enough for some of these young girls to be inspired to go on and do things they wanted to do, aspire to fulfill their dreams. So yes, to this day I get amazed how we can impact positively, in so many, it doesn't have to be great things. In little ways we can impact as well. So not to sort of underestimate, the power of those little actions as well. I think sometimes when we think about activism, we think about sacrificing your sleep, your time, your food, everything. All your energy has to go because you're an activist. It's not necessarily the case. It's also the little things as well.
Yeah, amazing. And yeah, just the power of being a role model, isn't it? Like, and I sometimes think it's a radical act to just believe in ourselves enough to think that we can make a difference. Like, and maybe that's as women as well, where we think perhaps, we perhaps are backwards in coming forward sometimes. And that is in itself a radical act to say, yeah, I believe in myself with all of my flaws and like self-confidence issues and whatever else is going on for me, remembering that just by putting myself forward, I'm saying to other young women, and in fact to everybody, other ordinary people, I'm saying, if I can do this, so can you.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that is activism, isn't it? And I am really struck by how each of our panelists this evening has started off by saying, I don't know if I'm an activist. And it's just amazing to hear your story and to reflect back at you that absolutely you're an incredible change maker, and thank you so much for your work. On to our next panelist. Thank you so much.
Yeah, wow, your impact, I can assure you, will be felt further than the people in this room tonight. That was exceptional. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I feel really humbled and privileged to just be sat here in your presence.
Thank you.
I saw our next panelist give a little chuckle at Stephen's comment about gluing oneself to railings, and our next panelist most certainly is definitely an activist. Marcus Bailey from XR Cymru, over to you. I believe you have some slides to share.
Thanks, Ellie. Yes, let's put that up and see if I can get it to work.
Yep, perfect.
Can you see it on your screens? Wowee, I've got screen share to work. How incredible.
Can you press present and see if it goes into present mode for us? But it is working.
Yeah.
There we are, perfect.
I think it's quite remarkable. Well, what the three previous panelists have done and are doing, I think is absolutely remarkable. And I also think it's interesting that they didn't think they were activists. By contrast, what I do, I think is not at all remarkable. It's different, I'll grant you that, but it's not remarkable. So I'm not going to explain a great deal about what drives Extinction Rebellion. I think everybody in this room is aware of what drives Extinction Rebellion. So what I will talk about briefly, I hope, is what motivates me, and I'll be particularly interested in hearing comments either in the chat or afterwards if we have time, about whether or not what I do, what we do, makes your work in climate and environment and so forth more difficult, or whether it makes it easier, or how you feel about it. So I'm very interested in your views. I'm not usually a big fan of chat in Zoom meetings, but do feel free to tap away on this one, and I will save the chat and read your comments. So what we do, well, you'll be familiar with bits and pieces that do make it on television or in the media. Big march in London. In fact, that was a huge march in London earlier this year. There were 100,000 people in London for 3 days for this. And we think 70,000 people took part in this march alone. 70,000 people. It didn't make the news. Virtually nothing in the news. It was a very personal journey. I know this woman quite well, also from Cardiff, and her her beliefs are absolutely genuine. It's a very personal experience. I know it's controversial. It is about the future generation. My generation have made enough of a mess of it, and we genuinely do feel the next generation has got to do better. And our actions take all sorts of forms, from the theatrical to the fairly dramatic. In this case, one of the proudest photographs I think I've ever taken. Was delighted to get that. The red rebels on the right confronting the black and yellow of the police was a very moving experience, and entirely non-violent, amicable, respectful. It was quite incredible. Two different scenes. One is in Wales, a mine called Fosseran. I was locked to that boat and arrested for it. The woman sitting under the bows was also arrested, as was the woman in the boat. So contrast that with a huge march in Glasgow at COP26. Again, mass demonstrations. That did make a bit of news, but not an awful lot. So we also do what we refer to as non-spicy actions. So sometimes they're dramatic, sometimes they're humorous. Again, I think it was Glasgow. Some not much more than a sort of creative graffiti, if you might call it that, decorating BP signs with XR logos, and the Gresham College in London with XR logos. So there's a big range of what we do. There's also a big range of people that are involved in the jobs that they do. For every arrestee, as we refer to them, there's a whole stack of other people who are involved in the background, sometimes in the foreground because they're messaging media people, and they do interviews and try to get the attention of the police or of the media, whilst we're getting the attention of the police. Then we changed our tactics quite a bit in the last year or so. It used to be blocking pretty much random roads and bridges, causing mass disruption. Much more now we target, our actions are much more targeted. This was a bank that's involved in banking for the fossil fuel industry and making colossal profits out of it. So our actions are tailored at banks who do that, fossil fuel companies themselves, oil companies. That red paint, by the way, is completely water-based. It just washes off and causes no permanent damage. In spite of that, still getting arrested for that sort of thing. Now, I've been arrested a few times, quite a few times perhaps, by our own choice. 51 of us organised to spend up to 8 days on remand in Birmingham, in jail across Britain for an action outside Birmingham at the same time. But it was comparatively straightforward, really. So that's sort of what we do. Why do we do it? Well, because it works. If you think of civil resistance over the years, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, I should of course say Martin Luther King, and more recently Greta Thunberg, have all demonstrated that yes, you can get your message across if you make enough of a fuss. And their academic studies as well. Jenniworth, can't remember her first name, although her book is fantastic. And in Wales, we've got Dr. Laura as well, who has been fairly active in spreading her message about what works and how it works and why it works. We do spicy and non-spicy, as I've mentioned. Quite a lot to do with that, about media attention. I mentioned the 100,000 people at what we call the big one, the big march in London. I didn't like the name, but there we go. A few days later, that should say, 2 people at the World Snooker World Cup made stacks of not only headline, but it really engaged the public. There were entire chat shows on Radio 5 Live devoted to their protest, which was fantastic as far as I was concerned, because it got people talking about it. Carol referred to changing things by talking about it. Well, that's absolutely what we try to do. In other spheres, it's called moving the Overton window, which is getting people to talk about it and getting politicians to talk about it. And the reason why we do it is because nothing else has worked. We've all, and continue to, written letters, written to our MP, talked to our MP, joined other organisations. I'm also involved with Friends of the Earth as well as Wellbeing Economy Wales. But we found that the situation with the climate is still getting worse. So can't think if anyone came up with a better way of us getting our point over and trying to make a change. We're very happy to hear it. What do you think we can achieve? Well, possibly nothing. We recognise that. We might even make things worse. But this idea of the Overton window and getting people talking, nobody was talking about climate or environmental collapse in 2018 when Extinction Rebellion was first put together. And by 2023, everybody's talking about it. Now, how much difference we made in that, I have no idea. But we certainly set out. I didn't join until 2019, inspired by the early protests. But we certainly have got people talking. Even if they're critical of what we do or the way we do it, they're talking about it in the pubs, they're talking about it in cafes, they're talking about it in buses. Even politicians, although they're not doing very much, but at least they're talking about it. So getting people talking about climate change and the environmental crisis, moving the Overton window. And we believe that we've pretty much got people talking about climate. And now we're being more targeted. We're targeting the bad actors, as we would call them, and trying to get people talking about them. And the banks that do all the banking for oil companies, fossil fuel companies, make colossal profits. The oil companies themselves, of course, and so forth. But we're also trying to influence decision makers, shareholders, particularly with regard to their reputational image. And this works. Investors don't like it if they think that what they're doing is likely to lose them money. So there's a thing called stranded assets. So people investing in the new oil licenses in the North Sea at the moment can't lose a lot of money because those assets will never be retrieved fully. The people who sell them those won't lose money because they always win, but it's the individual pension funds and so forth. And if we can get shareholders and decision makers to look at their reputational image, we'll try to influence councils, and influencing the Welsh government and UK government is probably the least successful part of this. the UK government response to our increased action over the last couple of years has been to crank up the penalties and to make the law tougher. But a quotation that's often attributed to Mahatma Gandhi is that first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And we do it because nothing else has worked. So the personal bit, why can I do it? Well, I'm white, male, British, middle class, straight, retired, and I have no dependents. As opposed to somebody who is a Black Asian, female, foreign national or immigrant, working class or unemployed, gay, full-time job, or maybe trying to hold down 2 or 3 jobs, or a full-time carer, or someone with a family to support. So I can do these things because I have these privileges, if you can call being male a privilege. But that's the circumstances I find myself in. But with privileges come responsibilities. Thank you.
That is a powerful note to end on there, Marcus. Thank you. And you are certainly a very inspiring activist. And seeing the photographs of you being arrested just demonstrates your commitment to that cause. And yes, with the privileges that we have, and we all have some privileges as well. But yes, with the privileges that we have comes a responsibility that we have the capacity to act. Therefore, perhaps we should, on behalf of those perhaps who can't. Julia has her hand up. So Julia, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, on that note Marcus was making, being in the big one in London, I only went on the Friday because I'm disabled and it was too difficult to stay up there and all that sort of thing. But I spent the whole day and we got a taxi from the National Express coach station. And the driver, being a typical Londoner, and I'm happy that I've lived in London, my parents were from London, said, oh, there are all these nutters. And he said, you're all white privileged. I said, well, don't you think that being privileged, we can actually use our position to help those who aren't privileged? Oh, he shut up and he thought about it. So it made a huge difference. And I'm glad for that.
Yeah, I think sometimes we can shame ourselves by thinking that we're all so white and middle class, and we sort of shame ourselves into thinking, well, you know, who are we to speak up? But exactly as you say, flip it round and
somebody's got to do it, haven't they? Look
yes,
after
somebody's. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really powerful message. Margot.
I was particularly struck by Marcus's comments about trying to get the conversation out in the open, because one of the people I read about climate change had been involved with the big People's Assembly about climate, and she said that all of the elected people that she'd been involved in briefing would say the same thing. It's not being talked about on the doorstep, and it won't get me anywhere in my career as a politician. And until it starts being talked about on the doorstep, she couldn't see how anything could change. But we have seen in the past party conferences that it is being talked about on the doorstep now. So they've just moved the goalposts again. And they've said, well, it's not really about climate change, it's about cost of living, and it's about everything else. So it is hard to see quite what to do when obviously a lot of people in the climate change movement spent a lot of effort getting it talked about on the doorstep, and now the action isn't following. I don't know whether Marcus, you have an idea of what XR is going to do next?
I'm going to move the conversation on because our last panelist is short for time, so we must come to Poppy, even if we then continue this conversation after Poppy has had to leave, but we wouldn't want to miss her. So over to you, Ellie, to introduce our last panelist.
Thank you. Yes, I think we'll have to come back and talk about Marcus's activism once Poppy has spoken. Poppy is my very dear friend and colleague. She is the chair of the Youth Climate Ambassadors for Wales. Poppy.
Thank you so much, Ellie, and thank you so much for having me here today and for having YCA as a partner in this kind of core. I think that the conversations we've had have really been quite moving for me. I'm currently a university student at Yale University in America, which is why I do have to go shortly for class. But actually, I think sometimes I'm guilty myself of existing in this bubble of activism and of thinkers who very naturally consider themselves to be activists or consider themselves to be radical. And the reason why a lot of people consider themselves to be that is because they have the privilege to make time to develop opinions about things in a very academic and intellectual way. But I think actually a lot of the time the people who are producing and pushing that change forward in society are the people who often don't get the recognition, or are the people who often society has taught to not allow themselves to feel that pride and to not allow themselves to step into that power or acknowledge that they have that power. And I think the conversation that we've had today truly speaks to the fact that activism can be so many things and is so important, even if we consider ourselves to be an activist or not. A little bit of background to my activism. As Ali mentioned, I'm a member of the Youth Climate Ambassadors for Wales, and I'm so deeply proud to be chair of this organisation. I started my journey into climate activism actually out of my feminism and out of my anger at the world. I never considered myself to be an activist for a long time. I actually just considered myself to be a very angry teenager who needed somewhere to funnel this energy and this emotion. And I think over time I have began, like a lot of people who've spoken today, to legitimize my passion and my work and call it activism, and to hold the space to see it as something that could create change, which I think takes a very long time to accept and to celebrate that we are all powerful of creating that change. So YCA Wales, as Ali mentioned, is a group of 13 to 25-year-olds. We're a group of youth activists from Wales, and our mission is to amplify the youth voice and to promote accessible and unified climate action at all levels, which sounds like a really lovely slogan, but what that actually means is that we believe that everyone's voice is important, and we believe that those voices who have been underrepresented, and I would argue deliberately underrepresented, are actually crucial and essential to creating the world that we need to see and that future generations deserve to see. And so because of that, our work is rooted in that amplification and rooted in the idea of, well, if they're not going to give us a seat at the table, we're going to put up our own chair and maybe even build our own table if needs be. So throughout our time as a group, we have had the honour of being able to work with a range of people, from students in schools to businesses to attending COP26. And it was at COP26 where for the first time I realised the privilege I have that I get to choose to be an activist. We are partnered with an organisation called Size of Wales, and they work with the Wampees, which is an indigenous nation in Brazil. And through our conversation with the Wampees, I realised that they were there not because they enjoyed activism or because they loved public speaking or because even they had climate anxiety. They were there because our decisions in the UK and especially in the West ultimately are causing their livelihoods to be crucially damaged, and they're causing a complete shift in the way that they can live. And so they are activists not out of enjoyment or even out of the idea of self-pleasure. They are activists because they need to be, because nobody else is sharing their perspective or amplifying their voice. And I think recognizing the privilege that I have as to choose to be an activist was definitely a pivotal movement for myself and for the work of YCA. Since COP26, our work has shifted to focus on the intersection between between climate justice and social justice. And so at the moment, after about a year and a half of preparation and of being ready to be at this point, we're currently campaigning for the UK to recognise the status of climate refugees for a petition that we are very proud to be championing and to be amplifying, all rooted in that mission of amplifying underrepresented voices and promoting accessible and unified climate action. And so I think what this conversation naturally circles back to is what it means to be an activist. I think that the government, especially at the moment, is doing a very calculated job at enhancing the idea that to be an activist is a dirty word. It's something that you do not want to be proud of. It's not something that we should be promoting. But actually, I think that shows the power that activism has had. And if anything, it shows why it's needed now more than ever, because our voices and our passion is scaring the people in power. And what that means is that our activism, our determination to make the world better is putting the systems that create such intersectional oppression, that create climate change, that create gender inequality, is starting to feel the force of our determination. And I think that's why we're beginning to see this, for lack of a better word, propaganda about the dangers of activism, when in actuality it's the dangers of the system we exist in that cause us to exist. So I think what is really beautiful about activism is that it truly can be so many things. I wholeheartedly believe that activism can range from sharing a post on Instagram or being brave enough to talk about your opinions in a classroom setting, to being an active member of Extinction Rebellion, or to starting a charity, or to even engaging in panels like this. I believe that activism is when a person decides that they care about the world enough to critique it and enough to try to act on it, whether that means in a conversation setting or whether that means in a more material setting, like a lot of us kind of engage in. But I also think with that comes a level of elitism that I think we've touched on already in this call. I think often activism can be exclusive and not even branded, because I think unfortunately there is a correlation between white middle class people and normally white middle class straight people because of barriers and the multi-connected oppressions that create when you exist outside of that bracket. And I think now we're stepping into an era where if we want our activism to be as effective and as ambitious as it can be, we need to recognize that, and we need to begin to break down that barrier or that exclusivity that we have, maybe unintentionally, but that has been created. But I think while the current activist world can have its faults, and while we have a lot of growing to do, activism continues to be honest, the reason I am the way I am. Being an activist is what drives a lot of my decisions, whether that's what to study at university, who to be friends with, or even how I want to see my life pan out. I think that activism is truly something that has changed my life, and I'm so deeply grateful for that. It's allowed me to meet people like Ellie, and it's allowed me to engage in conversations like we have today. And I think that one of the next steps is to ensure that a range of people across the world have access to this beautiful space and have access to be able to engage in it. So in summary, I think that activism is one of the most precious and important aspects of our society. And I think even though it's branded to us as a negative thing, I think that speaks to how positive it can be. Because I think if they weren't trying to make us seem like bad people for caring, then that would mean we wouldn't be doing our job to the extent that we know that we're doing it to. But yeah, thank you so much for having me today and for continuing to amplify these voices and the structures of the world that we exist in. I think it's so important, and I'm honoured to be here.
Wow, Poppy, it's always such a gift to hear you speak, and you are a really inspiring young leader. And it's reminding me that actually one of the things that inspired my activism was meeting an amazing young woman who was trying to raise money for a refugee crisis, and it was seeing this young woman really standing up for her beliefs that made me think actually I should be doing something too. And so I think the power of youth ambassadors is really striking, and it really does shine the light on all of us to say, what are we doing to help change the future? And I was struck by many of the things you said, and I know we haven't really got time to cover them all, but Marcus, you want to come in, and hopefully we've got Poppy for just a minute or so more to just reflect. Marcus.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, Poppy, amazing. And it demonstrates, it reminded me of an error, a serious error I made in my presentation. Could you absolutely demonstrate what I failed to say when I would talk about I can do what I do because I'm white, male, middle class, all of that. What I had on my slides, but I deleted it, was the reason I can do that is because it's if I can feel reasonably safe going through the British police service, custodial systems, the British courts, and so on. Whereas if you're young, female, black or Asian, gay, unemployed, all those other things, you might well feel much more intimidated about going through that process. And that was the point that I had put in my original slides, but I deleted it. So apologies to everyone here, because this room absolutely demonstrated that those people are active and are showing a remarkable bravery, much more than I would have. So my apologies for that, and I hope I've gone some way to make amends.
Thank you, Marcus. Poppy, can I ask you one question, which is, when you look at young people across society, do you feel that many of them are activists? Do you despair sometimes that more young people aren't standing up as you are? I mean, you're a powerful, but you're a small group of youth climate ambassadors in Wales. Where are all the other youth activists, and what do you think about other young people?
Yeah, that's definitely a very layered question. I think that the amount of youth activism that we see today is really inspiring and really incredible. I've said this a million times before, and I'll stand by. I will die on this hill. I think that if it wasn't for youth activism and the youth determination in the climate movement, climate change and climate action would not be as high on world leaders' agendas as it is today, categorically. I think that sometimes young people fall, I wouldn't even say fall. I think that sometimes society creates such a good job at creating this terrifying image of what it means to be an activist, or almost the nerdy and lame kind of side of caring about the world, that sometimes young people can feel disempowered. And I also think I come from a very working class background, and I think that a lot of my friends knew about these issues because they were experiencing about it, but nobody had told them that they have the power to make a change in them. And equally, in situations like that, when you are working a job in addition to school, in addition to university applications to help support your family, it's very infrequent that you're going to have the headspace to think, okay, today I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read about intersectional feminism and how that links to climate displacement. Because unfortunately, to have that headspace is also an element of privilege that I think sometimes goes unrecognized. So I think while there are certainly a group of young people that are very loud and very present, and they continue to inspire me as a young person to stay involved in activism, I think there's always ways that we can engage more young people, but I also don't always think that it is the fault of those young people for not engaging, if that makes sense. But I think, for example, movements like Vote at 16 in Wales, and for those beginning kind of outreach and empowerment things that we see in schools and in communities that have often gone underrepresented, are really paving the way to creating that empowerment. So yeah, I think that there is definitely a section of young people that are very loud and very present, and they are incredible, but we can always work to empower more young people, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. And when I was planning this forum, my fundamental aim was to highlight something that quite a few panelists have mentioned now. Activism is such a broad term, and that moving towards, I think, creating meaningful change for us and those who will follow us, that can take any form. And we've heard tonight from a range of activists and change makers on a variety of topics, but they're not exhaustive examples. And in building this wellbeing economy for Wales that we all want to see, I think we have to recognise that all forms of activism are valid, and they play an important role in securing that greener, fairer and safer Wales within an economy that serves our well-being as well as the well-being of our planet. And it doesn't matter what issue is important to you, whether it's related to social injustice or the climate and nature crises or anything in between. If it matters to you, I think it is valid. And in order to transition to a well-being economy, I think we need to speak up about issues that matter to us in any way that we can. We must support each other. It's really important to me that we have spaces like this to talk and support each other through the challenges that we face, and challenges like the ones that have been touched on tonight by our panelists. But all that's left for me to say, because we are very over time, is thank you all for taking the time to join in with this conversation. And I hope that you're leaving feeling as inspired as I am, and encouraged and supported within this community to begin or continue your change-making journey. On a more logistical note, a recording of the session and the speakers' slides will be shared with you all very soon. But diolch yn fawr iawn, noswaith dda.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you all so much. We'll invite you to unmute yourselves and say goodbye, and thank you all for being here for what I think has been one of our most inspiring sessions. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Lovely.
Thank
Thank you all
you.
for fighting the good fight.
Have a good
Cheers.
night.